What's up everyone? Welcome to my channel. My name is Edward Lee. I'm a filmmaker photographer based in Seattle, Washington, and this is my RED Komodo 6K build. Now in this video, I'm going to share with you all the components that make up this build. I geek out about this kind of stuff, so I did a lot of research to make sure it felt natural, felt intentional, all the wires were tucked away neatly. So we're going to build the rig together from the ground up, and then in the later part of the video, I want to share some of my purchasing decisions, why I love this camera, and how I went from starting with like an A7 III, working my way up to a RED, and being able to work with some of my bigger video production clients now. So let's get right into it. This video is sponsored by SmallRig, and many of the parts for this build were sent to me. Now to start, of course, we have the camera, the RED Komodo 6K, and the cage I'm using is the SmallRig cage. Personally, I love this cage for the Komodo. It's nice and simple. There's a 1/4-20 mounts on the sides of the cage itself. I do wish there was more 1/4-20 mounting points, like in the bottom front, or maybe even on the sides toward the bottom. Now the battery plate that I ended up going with is the Core SWX Komodo battery plate. This is the gold mount version. I'll go into a little bit later on why I went gold mount instead of V mount. The Core SWX is also RED approved, which, you know, with a camera like this, it gives you that peace of mind that RED work with Core to make sure that it approves and works well with the camera itself. And on here I have the Canon RF to EF mount adapter. I also have the speed booster and drop-in filter versions of this adapter, and I switched out depending on my needs for the shoot day. Now starting from the bottom, I use the SmallRig quick release plate. This is a Manfrotto 501 style quick release plate that pairs really nicely with the lightweight base plate that's also by SmallRig. And this base plate has options to insert two 15mm rods, which is great for rigging out other additional accessories. And mounted beneath the base plate, I have this Kessler quick stand, which is really nice because I use it with the Kessler quick release on my tripod, which allows me to go handheld to sticks super quick. These Kessler accessories are a little bit pricey for what they are and their function, in my opinion, but the build quality is super nice, and I honestly don't have any regrets with purchasing these two things. Shout out to my friend Ryan Cowell, who also made a RED Komodo build video. I actually found this whole Kessler quick release system from his build, and with the quick stand, you're able to place the Komodo on the ground without it toppling over, because if you just have the base plate, it'll teeter and totter, but with this quick stand, it makes it nice and sturdy. Next, I have the RED outrigger handle. Honestly, you don't need this one. You can just get any other side handle. I just really liked how it felt. I love the fact that it's made by RED and it has the record button built into the handle itself. Now moving towards the top, I have the SmallRig top handle, and I also added a small NATO rail at the end of it with a NATO monitor mount for my monitor. Next, I have this rosette extension arm for the focus handle that I'm going to show you in a bit, but it's simply just to get the handle a little bit off the camera body using the rosette mounts. For the glass, this is constantly changing depending on the needs of the project. I sometimes rent other lenses, but lately I've been rocking the DZO Film Best Bid Prime lenses a lot. I usually rent them because I'm still figuring out if I want to invest in a whole set, but for now I really love the 25mm focal length on the Komodo because it kind of gives me like a 35mm almost equivalent with the Super 35 sensor, but if I want to use the speed booster, I can get closer to that full frame 25mm look when needed. For power, I'm rocking the Nano Micro 98 Wh battery by Core. This is a gold mount, as I mentioned previously. Personally, I just like gold mounts more because they feel just more secure than V mounts. And I'm rocking this battery in particular because it's also made by Core, which pairs nicely with the Core battery plate. Prior to this battery plate and battery combo, I had a Tilta Advanced Power Module. This was a V mount, and I also paired it with a SmallRig V mount battery. Their new V mount battery is also, I think, a 98 or 99 Wh battery. But it also has a screen with output and percentage readouts, which actually is more uncommon in some of these micro batteries. So for SmallRig, be able to put that screen on there for such a small battery is really nice. But for me, the Tilta battery plate that I had previously just didn't work out because it required you to plug in the 9-pin extension port that is on the Komodo. However, the thing is, I need that extension port to be available to plug in my monitor to do RED control, which we'll go into in a little bit. But with the core plate, it frees up that port on the Komodo at the cost of a few additional ports on the plate versus the Tilta, but I didn't find myself needing all those ports on the Tilta for the type of work that I do. I was totally fine with making the switch to the core plate. Now moving on to the rails, I have this SmallRig universal lens support that just goes onto the 15mm rods to kind of give a little bit of extra support onto the lens itself. Ideally in the future, I'd like to get a locking EF mount adapter that also bolts onto the cage itself, just to get that extra security. Next, we have the SmallRig Magic Fizz wireless follow focus system. This is the motor. I do think that plugging in power into the focus motor is way cleaner, because when you put on the little plate they provide with an NP battery, it does look a little bit clunky and it's just kind of oddly shaped. So I much prefer the configuration I have it in. Now to control the follow focus motor, I use the SmallRig follow focus hand grip, which is also part of this Magic Fizz ecosystem, but I attached this hand grip to the rosette extension arm that I was showing you a bit earlier, and it kind of acts as a second side handle plus the focusing capability. And this staggered, left and right handle setup gives this odd comfort that is super unexpected, but when I'm holding it for handheld shooting, it just feels natural and it feels comfortable when I'm using the left hand just a little bit forward than my right hand on the outrigger handle. Now, for those times when I'm not using a follow focus system, obviously I just take off the hand grip and the follow focus, and I'll rock with a more minimal setup with just the outrigger handle and just manually focus with my hand. It is a separate purchase, but you can also get the SmallRig wireless hand wheel, and this controller can be used if you usually work with an AC or additional crew members. Now, what's really awesome about the wireless hand wheel controller is that it can be paired with the hand grip. I know a lot of terms, but this is ideal if you're looking to have your AC control two motors at the same time with one kind of system. So if you attach the hand wheel to the hand grip, now there is two wheels essentially that you can control both the focus and maybe the aperture at the same time. For matte box, I'm using the SmallRig multifunctional modular matte box. This is the VND kit, so I'm able to get that variable ND in this matte box. It also comes with some step-up rings, so I'm able to quickly mount the step-up ring onto the DZO Vespid Prime and then put on the matte box. Really straightforward. The dials are comfortable, everything fits nicely. Now for a field monitor, I'm using the SmallHD Indy 7. I used to have a 5-inch monitor, but personally, I just like having the bigger screen. When on set, it's just easier to navigate, and I just like having a bigger screen. It makes me feel more inspired and also help me just compose my image a bit better versus the 5-inch. I think for the price, the Indy 7 is just a killer deal. So I would highly recommend picking one up if you're looking for a field monitor. Now next is more of a cable management accessory, but SmallRig makes these little cable clamps, and they're really nice actually, because you can screw them into any 1/4-20 mount, and they're spring loaded, so they keep the cables nice and secure. They're not dangling around. I'm gonna go over the cables that I'm using to bring power and just operate the RED Komodo. Now the first cable I have is this SmallHD 5 to 9 pin LEMO that allows me to control the Komodo settings directly through the SmallHD. Now, I will say it's pretty crazy that they charge $500 just to get an activation license and this cable. Like quite literally, they sent me a QR code and this cable, and I paid $500 for it. However, being able to use the SmallHD for RED control directly on the field monitor is so worth it. The controls and just the UI is so much smoother and more convenient than using the small Komodo screen that's on the camera itself. And because SmallHD and RED, collaborated on this and they worked on this together to make it possible, the integration is super seamless. Now next, I have this locking DC right angle cable that plugs directly into the Komodo through the 2-pin connector that is available on the core battery plate. Powering the monitor through the nano battery allows me to shed some weight on top of the camera build and not have to use additional or actual batteries on the SmallHD monitor itself. Now next is the SDI cable from the SmallHD into the Komodo. That way I can actually see the camera feed on the monitor itself. Now, RED recommends using a 12G rated SDI cable for the Komodo, and in this clip I'm actually using a 3G cable, but that's because after doing research, I ordered like a more expensive 12G cable and it hasn't come yet, but I'll link the one that I did get that's not in this video in the description below. Then I take these 3 cables, plug it into the SmallRig cable clamp that I mounted onto the cage earlier, and it keeps everything nice and tight. Now, the last cable I have is this USB-A to USB-C, which I draw power from the core battery plate into the SmallRig focus motor, so that way I don't have to use an external battery on the motor itself. So that leads me to my current build, which is the RED Komodo. And before I purchased this camera, I rented it 2 or 3 times for projects, and I honestly just fell in love with the image quality, the modularity of it, the form factor, being able to have a minimal setup, being able to have a built-out rig like this. Just in general, it was just a great experience for me. I think the biggest impact for me in terms of image quality when it came to the RED though was how it handled highlights. I was shooting it in straight up daylight without any diffusion or anything like that, and the way it handles skin tones and the way light hits skin, the way it handles, you know, like shinier surfaces, it doesn't feel digital. And being able to have the global shutter and, you know, moving it around more quickly, it just looked more natural. It didn't have that jitter or that glitch that you sometimes see with in-body image stabilization in some of these stacked mirrorless cameras. Not to mention the R3D files that come out of this camera are seriously amazing. You know, obviously with any raw footage, being able to go in and change the ISO, the white balance after the fact just gives me that peace of mind that even if I botch a shot just a little bit, in post I can go and change all those settings. When you're shooting on higher budget projects, it's more important for you to make sure you get the right exposure every single time. Having those types of features baked in are really nice. So over the years, I've always tried to have a designated video camera just because this is something that I've always tried to push the boundaries on so I can continue to get better as a kind of self-taught filmmaker. Now, if you go back on my channel a couple years back, I made a video on my A7 III build. Now, this is my very first go at having a camera cage, learning all the ins and outs of that. It was really minimal, it was modest, it had some cold shoe mounts, had a side handle. It was super awesome. I got really excited about it. And full transparency, during that time, my gigs, I was only charging clients maybe between $500 and $1,000. At the time, I felt like with an A7 III, that was pretty appropriate, and I still had a long way to go in terms of video production. Now, after the A7 III, my next build after that was my very first real cinema camera, I could say, or at least it was for me at the time, and that was the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. I got the 4K, and that camera, I can confidently say, was an absolute game changer for me. Going from the 8-bit footage that came out of the A7 III over into 10-bit, being able to shoot Blackmagic RAW in the BMPCC was pretty life-changing. I'm not gonna lie. When I first shot a project with the Blackmagic, put it into my editing software, and I saw the footage, I just fell in love with how it looked, the highlight roll-off, the way it handled the image. It just looks so different from when I was shooting on the A7 III. And I pretty much stuck in that Blackmagic ecosystem for quite some time. I even got the Blackmagic 6K when it came out because I was just such a big fan of the 4K. I really loved the Pocket Cinema cameras. I went through the whole process of building a rig for the Pocket Cinema camera as well, which I also made a video about a couple years back. I felt like it made me get super uncomfortable with trying to shoot everything manual. You know, I didn't have great autofocus, didn't have built-in ND filters. It had way more video focus features than the A7 III, but it was definitely nerve-wracking trying to go to a run and gun shoot with a Blackmagic. As far as where I was at in my business at that time, I was charging between $2,000 and $4,000 per project when I had the Blackmagic. And that is around the time when I took my video side of my business a bit more seriously and could turn it into a real full-time job where I don't have to worry about paying my bills, and I was really just kind of full-blown doing video at the time. Fast forward a couple years, I started to have FOMO of all the new cameras that were coming out. So I pulled the trigger and got a Canon C70. I was ramping up a lot of my YouTube stuff at the time. This was during the pandemic, so I wanted to get something that had autofocus, that had built-in ND filters, an audio interface. All these things were now becoming more important to me that didn't really matter to me when I had the Blackmagic because my scope of work was changing a bit. So the C70 felt like the perfect fit. Now with the C70, my video projects at that time and where I was at as kind of a freelancer were anywhere between 5 and 20K. The C70 was the camera that allowed me to take on some bigger projects where I landed like my first $15,000 project and my first $18,000 project. But when I got to these bigger projects that required more people and more crew. I don't know, the C70, I felt like it wasn't enough for me. I wanted a camera that was more modular, something that I can grow with, something that wasn't just easy and convenient, something that pushed the boundaries for me. And so that's why I started looking at the RED Komodo, because it was a camera I felt like I could grow with. Now I wanted to provide some tips as a freelancer, someone who started as a one-man band, because I feel like a lot of people who build out these types of cameras are working on proper production sets where they have like a first AC and they have people helping run the show, you know, so they need something that's modular so they can build it out. But then there's also a group of people who I feel like have these types of cameras that are still running gun, that are still a one-man band, and they're just trying to make better videos and land bigger budget clients. And this is more of a business tip because I feel like I've been able to freelance now and run my own thing for going on 5 years. And so I just want to shed some light on why having a proper video camera is important. Now, I'm not saying that you can't make a ton of money and quit your job or go full time and make a really good wage just having more smaller mirrorless cameras. Like, you definitely can. I'm not saying you have to go get a rig like this. But when I look back at my own journey, if I had just stuck with that A7 III and I just tried to make as much money with that camera and just never pushed the boundaries, never tried to get better cameras from the A7 III, I can confidently say I don't think I'd be a better filmmaker. I feel like I would have been capped at the A7 III. I would have made more money, but my skill would have plateaued because I just was comfortable. And I look back at my journey and I look at all the cameras that I've had, I'm constantly getting cameras that push the boundaries for me so that I can continue to get uncomfortable and continue to get better as a filmmaker. It's no different than when you're buying cars. Think about when you buy your cars. I made a video a couple years back when I bought an STI. It was like, I don't know how many of you who watch my channel are into cars, but I love cars. But when I got my first sports car, I guess you could say, something that was quicker, it was kind of scary at first. When I first drove it, I was like, this is way too much speed for me. I was coming from like something slower and it was manual transmission. It got me super uncomfortable. But the thing is, you eventually learn that car. You understand how fast it goes, you understand how to drive it. Now that becomes the new normal for you. Now you have to go to the next level. It's very hard to go backwards, but that's why you continue to upgrade, because you continue to get better with your skills, you continue to get better with your knowledge and what you know. It's the same thing with cameras. Once you have gone to a cinema camera or you make your way up, you're probably never gonna shoot on something like an entry-level mirrorless camera again. You're just gonna continue to upgrade your skills. And I take that approach when it comes to buying gear. What's interesting about what we're talking about right now, about getting uncomfortable and how, you know, pushing the boundaries on camera gear can make you a better filmmaker, this honestly applies to everything as a freelance creative. Like, you know, running my own business, trying to be my own boss, all these things. Aside from the camera gear, getting uncomfortable and making different changes so that that becomes the new norm and just continuing to climb that ladder, that applies to everything in my business. And I credit that concept to just how I've been able to do my own thing for the last 5 years. Now, much of what was said in this video is honestly my own personal preferences, my own opinions, and just my own experience. So you don't have to take everything. Just take what you will from this video. Hopefully I provided some sort of value. And if you have any questions regarding this rig, I'll link all the parts that I talked about in the description. Or if you have questions regarding just freelancing or video production, you wanna have just some awesome conversations in the comment section, I'm definitely gonna be looking at everything. So definitely leave them down below and I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can. Other than that, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.